Before we go into the next variant, time to review another piece of Paramount history. As I mentioned previously, Paramount became an independent company in 1927, and with that it spelled the slow death of the famous Players Lasky Corporation. However, as time went on, Paramount again faced financial troubles. Paramount's reliance on the theater chain concept to produce revenue soon became their downfall as the Supreme Court told them that they could not own their own theater chains. In addition, the senior management at Paramount became senior both in name and chronologically. They were unable to adapt to the turbulent movie climate, so in 1966, out of desperation, the company was sold to a conglomerate, namely Gulf and Western Industries Incorporated. Funny thing about Gulf and Western, they had a rather diverse portfolio. The companies they had a stake in ranged from record labels such as Stax, to publishing companies such as Simon & Schuster, and even to electronics companies such as, you ready for this? SEGA. What a crazy world we live in, huh? Back to Paramount. Because Gulf and Western acquired Paramount, the logo was altered to include Gulf and Western in the byline. This rebranding occurred around 1968 and continued for close to 2 decades. In addition, the text was altered. Jan DeMella's Perumount still remains, but instead of a Paramount picture, we are told simply that it is Paramount. The star count still remains at 24, but the logo just appears more empty and deadpan. There are also several forms of this variant that I unearthed. Here's one version with some uplifting music. One version that has the closet killer music. And then there is another version in which the Gulf and Western byline is animated into the logo. The byline enters in 2 halves and flies in from opposite directions. In addition, around the early 70s, Paramount shaved 2 stars off their logo, meaning we are currently at 22 stars. Still an even number, but geez. Still confusing. However, with the 22 stars and Perumount covered, it's time to now talk about Paramount's affinity with a certain primary color, and the resultant tasteful artiness Paramount adopted. I know I made this joke already, but it appears Paramount took a page from Picasso's book and entered into a temporary blue period. But with this bad blue boy comes an aesthetic change in the font and stars, and these changes make the logo appear rather familiar. We still start with Perumount, but then the stars and the Paramount title come in. Afterwards, the mountain and the surroundings disappear to reveal a world of blue, thus introducing the Blue Mountain of awesomeness. The font adopted for the logo bears a major resemblance to the current Paramount font, and in this instance, the mountain appears rather similar too. Aside from the font change, the byline notice was also repurposed so that the phrase, a Gulf and Western company, is, in a probably unintentional way of going full circle, is spatially arranged in the same fashion as the older Paramount text seen in the variants we discussed earlier. Some subvariants of the logo were as follows. Here we have a subvariant in which the text, stars, and byline fade in, and the entire background just fades to blue without any fanfare or movie soundtrack to bolster the logo's presence. Note how in one version the Perumount mountain juts into the Paramount text. Next, we have a few off-center subvariants, as I call it. These variants involve the same effect, but the inner dark blue circular portion appears too small for the text, stars, and byline notice, almost as if it was some sort of weird misplastering. Here are several examples of this. Finally, we have the debut of Paramount's Fanfare. Some people argue that the Fanfare did not make an appearance until the CGI variant, but I think I have confirmed that there is a Blue Mountain subvariant that contains the Paramount Fanfare, which dates its first appearance back to 1979. Here is the subvariant in all its majesty. Unfortunately, like Picasso's blue period, this logo faded out of the blue, but not before being replaced with a logo that embodied the inexorable juggernaut that was the adoption of CGI animation, and at the right time for a monumental anniversary no less. In line with other logos that we have discussed, Paramount also celebrated major anniversaries. In 1987, Paramount celebrated its 75th anniversary with a new logo design that was done by Dario Campanile, another matte artist. In addition, for the first time, the logo employed CGI animation. The animation was done by Apogee Inc. Based on the painting rendered by Campanile, the mountain and background were redone with beautiful detail, and the animation, despite it appearing minimal, gave life into the logo. For the first time, the Paramountain, still mostly based on Arte Sanraku and perhaps even Monviso, is an active element in the presentation of the logo. At the same time, Paramount was reorganized, but we'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's look at the main subvariant that features the 75th anniversary notice. Here's a breakdown of how the logo presents itself. We are greeted with the Campanile-created Paramountain as stars fly in single file from the bottom of the screen. They swirl around the logo, create their 22-star semicircle, and make way for the Paramount text and the Gulf Western byline. The only major difference is that the words 75th Anniversary appears in the center of the mountain in a fancy white font with gold borders. There are two subvariants of this 75th anniversary logo. There is a prototypical version which has a subdued form of the 75th anniversary notice. Then there is the more recognizable variant with bigger text for the 75th anniversary notice and the return of the Paramount Fanfare, which makes this logo pretty memorable. To me anyway. In addition, there is a generic form of this variant that does not contain the anniversary notice, though it's still as impressive nonetheless. Now, this variant remained the same for quite some time, though Paramount still had its fair share of reorganizations, which paved the way for even more subvariants of the CGI Paramountain. In 1989, Gulf Western reorganized to become a more focused entertainment and media company. At that point, Gulf and Western was rebranded as Paramount Communications Inc. This renaming of the company, naturally, forced Paramount to create a modified byline. Here are two subvariants that contain the Paramount Communications Inc. byline. However, the Paramount Communications byline would not last long, as the mass media conglomerate known as Viacom purchased 50% of Paramount in 1994. By that point, Paramount was officially a subsidiary of Viacom. And you know what that means, folks. Yup, the byline changed again. This time the byline read, a Viacom company, and note the 90s Viacom font that is reminiscent of the 90s television idents Viacom used at the time. As 2002 approached, Paramount devised another variant for its 90th anniversary. What better way than to grace us with beautiful CGI and a redesigned mountain? Enter our next variant,